Technology becoming an increasingly prominent part of our lives, including children. To talk more about this, we're joined by the clinical director from Kite Child Psychology. Thanks so much for coming in. As we are seeing iPads, iPhones, all these devices out there, is there a concern, or I guess what is the risk of kids and technology?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think technology's become sort of this increasingly dominant force in our lives. And, you know, technology adds a lot to our lives. It enriches it in many ways. But only now are we really starting to understand what sorts of activities, what sorts of skills kids may be missing out on as a result of the amount of time that's being spent on devices.
And what are those fallouts?
So I think, there's quite a few, but I think three of the key ones that I want to highlight are play-related skills, play-related social skills, and then interpersonal communication. So when we look at play, what we're starting to see is kind of a decrease in fine motor and gross motor skill development because kids simply aren't engaging with activities that would support them in those areas. And we're also starting to see decreases in physical literacy. So kids understanding how to read their bodies, understanding how to navigate physical environments around them. And then also play-related social skills. So it's very often through face-to-face interactive play that kids start to develop the capacity to solve problems together, to negotiate, to collaborate, to engage in kind of turn-taking behaviors. And technology really doesn't offer those opportunities, or it diminishes them quite substantially. And those play-based social skills translate quite a lot as kids grow older into just generally being able to work cooperatively with others.
Are part of the issue as well that you have parents, adults, who are glued and hooked onto their devices?
Yeah, and I think that's a really critical point, especially when we think about interpersonal communication, right? So now so much of how kids interact with others occurs on their devices, and the same happens with parents. And we're starting to see that people in general aren't necessarily able to read nonverbal communication as effectively as they once were, because so much of communication isn't words, it's body language, it's facial expression. Decreases in empathy, not understanding how your words or how your behaviors might be impacting somebody else because you're not looking at their face when they're talking. And this precedent that it's okay while you're talking to one person to just kind of be like, oh wait, now I'm going to stop this interaction and move over here. And I think that's kind of what we start to see when parents are also kind of hooked to their devices, this sense of, I'm going to pause what's going on right here and kind of just look at what's going on over here. And that might not be a precedent that we want to set in our families and in our communities.
It must be so tough. I'm not a parent, but I think of my friends and stuff who have kids, and I'm like, God, you're up against so much. Like, technology is so much a part of our everyday life, and there's so much of it out there. Growing up, before it was like, only watch TV for a couple hours, but now you're faced with this. What would be a key strategy for parents to be able to try and negotiate their way with technology and their kid?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the one thing to remember is that the amount of time kids should be spending on their devices, on screens, hasn't changed, which I think is what's so difficult for parents. There's so many more options now.
More screens.
But it really is just 2 hours a day. That's kind of the maximum amount of time that kids should be spending playing on their devices. So there's a few things parents can do. The first is having sort of healthy family-based practices. So using technology as an incentive, as a reward. Because really, if you have your kids on devices and then you're trying to take them off of those to do other things, that's going to be much harder. So if there are things you want your kids to do during the day, make sure technology is viewed as, dessert. It's the bonus that you get after that, or you earn time towards using your devices. It's not just kind of the go-to strategy that we're using. Making sure that kids don't have their screens in their rooms at night, because it can impact sleep quality. So even if you have a family docking station or charging station in the kitchen or in the parents' bedroom overnight, that can be a really positive thing. And the third thing I would say is, don't be afraid of your kids feeling bored. I think nowadays, we live in a society, technology especially has made us feel like we can never feel bored, and our devices are designed to stave off boredom, right? I mean, you're bored with one thing, you just click on something else, and you're in a totally new world. But the truth is that boredom is a really important experience for kids, and it's a really important precursor to experiences like creativity and persistence. It's often when we feel bored that we have an opportunity to do something new, to create something new. So as much as kids may say, I'm bored, that's not a bad thing. And I think by kind of supporting your kids and tolerating boredom and being okay with it and learning how to do other things to kind of fill that gap, there's really, key skills that kids can develop in those areas as well.
Great stuff. Really appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
You can get more info at yellowkite.ca. You can pick up the latest edition of Calgary's Child Magazine on stands around our city. You can also like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter.